Hello, and welcome to another contemplation on the Aries North Node. I'm so excited to get to continue this conversation and have this space to, like they say, still waters run deep. And as we really settle into this individual contemplation on the Aries North Node, it is amazing how layer after layer after layer of it will deepen into like understanding, and there's a huge difference between knowing something and understanding it. And that's what I feel like this deepening of this contemplation is really letting me understand it, like letting me feel it in my body and have the lived experience of it. And one of the pieces that I talk about a lot on my channel is, in general, being your authentic self, and all the reasons why we don't do that. And that conversation as an overarching model for owning authenticity, that is a perfect garden, perfect fertile soil to plant this Aries North Node contemplation, because the Libra South Node is dripping in inauthenticity. And the Aries North Node, which is living as its like divine self, like its fully expressed life spark energy, that's what Aries North Node is doing. And one of the key ingredients for the Aries North Node is courage. And so I think like that alone tells you something about, wait, why does it take courage to be our authentic self? And the answer is everything to do with the Libra South Node and the way that we treat each other when we witness each other, right? Like basically relationship dynamics in general. And I'm really, really contemplating and circling around these two words: you should, you should, you should. And again, it's like every time I bring you one of these contemplations, it's like, who's guilty party number one? This guy, right? Like, oh God, I wish there was like source code where I could go in and just like deleted and take that out of my vocabulary, where I will launch into, you should do it this way, you should do it this way, you should do this for these reasons, and just give and give and give of my own opinion. I do that oftentimes without really thinking about it, right? Like it's not even really intentional that, well, this is the part that I want to like really underscore about that experience. And this is more from like the receiving side of it that I've gotten to learn this. And the more I receive someone telling me you should, the more often I am really becoming aware of it in myself, and that I don't really like it when people do that to me. And so let me become aware of, when am I doing that to other people? Because what gets like written into the underlying kind of subtext of that message when you start in on you should is that what you're already doing, it doesn't work. It's not right. It's wrong. And you should be doing it like this. Like that's kind of that must be true if you're telling me that I should be doing this. It's such an implication of inadequacy. It's an implication of distrust. It's an implication of dislike. And none of these things are against the rules. There are no rules. Like we can be however we want, but the phrasing of you should, again, I want to unpack how like from the giving side, when I'm the one saying you should, it's like, how do I know that? What makes me think I know that? Right? Like, Of course I have intuition. Of course I have my own understanding. Of course I have my own belief systems, and I have a decent amount of self confidence, right? Like, and when you put all of that together, you can wind up with someone, me, who is really free with giving people the answer of like, yeah, you should do this. You should think about it this way. You should think about these important things. And that is why, that's one reason why I have, as I've gone along in my career, I have given myself more and more and more freedom to get to make decisions, because I do have such strong opinions about things that really, like, if you're gonna have that strong of an opinion, if you're gonna have that strong of that is such a tongue twister. If you're gonna have that strong of an opinion, then you should be in leadership. you should have some responsibility, because you have a creative force that's wanting to do it a specific way. And that's really cool, right? Like that, pairing that strong creative force of I want it done this way with a job where it's actually your job to get to decide how you do it. Like, that has been my goal as I've gone along in my career, is to give myself more and more and more responsibility, which lines up with my natural proclivity of wanting to tell people how to do things. Like, I've been very bossy, been told that my whole life. And it's because I have really strong opinions. I have really strong values that put things in a very clear space for me. And then the gap between knowing what I think and saying what I think, it's like almost non-existent. And so then I like slip into this behavior of starting to tell people like, you should do this. I just did it this morning. Like, that's why it's so fresh in my mind. And this awareness of you should, like, I want to wrap it in compassion, like everything else, right? Like, when we are giving people our opinion, when we are feeling strongly enough to start a sentence with you should, that I want to, like, you know, find the light in everything, right? There's light and dark in everything. Nothing is all bad. And so when we are very opinionated, that I think is a reflection of, you know, how strong your identity is. And that's never a bad thing, okay? Like, to have a strong identity, which is kind of another way of saying having a strong opinion, like, they're kind of the same thing. So when you're saying like you should, you're coming from a strong place of identity. You're identifying with your position such that you feel like you need to give it to somebody else. You're so proud of your position that you got to give it to somebody else. And I can vouch for, like, that's exactly what it feels like. Like this morning when I'm doing this to Dolly, and I'm like, oh, like, just completely jump in with like, yeah, you should do it like this, and you should think about this and like that, because this and this connects. And like, you know, that's another piece of my career. Like, as I've gotten even further, I went from being the boss to being the consultant. So now I'm not just responsible for making decisions for my own business, but I also get paid to come on site and help other people think through their decisions. And so that, again, it's like nothing is all bad. To have a strong opinion, to start a sentence with you should, like, I want me to let myself off the hook for this. And I also want anybody else out there who identifies as being opinionated to let themselves off the hook. The thing about it is, though, and here's the medicine that I want to give to myself and to anybody else who's resonating with this, is that, you know, in that Libra South Node context, other people are always just a mirror for us. So, you know, the fact that in that example with Dolly this morning, like, the fact that I was so confident in my position that I had to give it to her. I just like couldn't help myself. I didn't help myself. I just let myself indulge and like give her all my opinions, which she did not ask for. That's the main point of the story, right? I'm like, yeah, forcing my opinions on her. And that's the part where being opinionated is not a problem, okay? Like having strong opinions is not a problem. Forcing them on people who did not ask for them, that is something that I personally have met pushback on my whole entire life. I've been face to face with people who are like, you're too bossy. And all they're saying to me is, you're giving me too many opinions. I don't want this many opinions from you. Please take them back. Get them off me. Yeah, and I get it. Because I am like one of the most allergic to authority people, allergic to social expectations, like allergic to the should. I am personally. And yet I am also one of the quickest to, here's what you should do. You know what you should do is like, and just give them my brilliant idea, my brilliant opinion that I'm so proud of. And so again, it's like, I want to kind of sit back and be like, you know what, Carly, like I'm proud of you for being so strong in how you know yourself. Like knowing your own mind with that level of strength is beautiful. It really is. And that strength, you know, like sometimes it's gonna ooze out the edges in ways that you're like, ooh, yeah, maybe I, you know, get a little bit more skilled with this power as far as how do I want to wield it when I take my power out into the world, when I take my strong identity out into the world. How do I hold that power without that power accidentally, me not consciously meaning to, but all the same, that power stepping into the sovereignty of other people, right? Like it comes back to consent. Like, do they want to hear my opinion? Do they need my opinion? Never, not one time, never, not one time. People will always figure it out. That's the beautiful thing about free will and sovereignty. And, you know, like we are each individually empowered with every ounce of guidance we will ever need. We do not need each other's opinions. And I say this as a very opinionated person. And so all of it is like our relationship to it, right? And healing our relationship to it, healing my relationship with my bossy inner child. Like that's who I was when I was a child. Like I don't resonate with most people's description of childhood because I came in a CEO. I came in charge of who? My brothers, like my 3 brothers who eventually like really were not on board with that. By the time they're like 5, like, no, we're not putting up with this. Like you don't get to control us. You don't get to use your strong opinions to make decisions in our reality, right? Like I'm like 6 years old and receiving pushback on it's not cool to step in on somebody else's sovereignty. And still here I am nearly 30 years later, and I am still learning this lesson that like your strong identity, my strong identity is for me. My strong identity is for me to know what's right for me. My strong identity has nothing to do with anybody else. Nobody else needs my opinions. You know who needed to hear my opinion? Me, right? Like Dolly didn't need to hear it. I didn't need to say it to her. I could have spared her from that and just said it out loud later and given it to myself, right? Like that strong identity is about who I am and who I want to be in the world and how I want to conduct myself in my reality. The sovereignty of my free will. What do I want? My opinions are information for me to self-actualize. So like, we are not trying to amputate our opinions. That is not the point. You get to have every single opinion you have, every single one. That's kind of the beauty of Aries energy, is to become fully opinionated, fully in the strength of your identity, of like who are you and how do you want it? Like specifically, how do you want it to be? Because you get to have it exactly how you want. And nobody else gets to say, you should do it differently. All they're ever saying, right? Like, this is my medicine for myself, both on the giving and the receiving end of opinions, is like every single opinion is the person who owns it telling you more about themselves, right? So like when somebody says you should do it this way, what they're saying is I would do it this way. And that may or may not be relevant because they may or may not truly be in the situation with you. A lot of times, like, and exactly what I was doing this morning, like a lot of times we're giving our opinions on situations that we personally are not a part of. You know, like this is not my business at all. And I just like launch into like, here's all these opinions. Like you can, you know, like it's a buffet of opinions. Here you go. You're welcome. You're welcome for like all this brilliance that I'm giving to you. Like, it's so tempting to think that the right answer that we found is the right answer for everyone else. And I get the impulse to help. I get the impulse. Like that's basically what my whole podcast is. I learned like all that podcast is over 100 episodes worth is me telling stories of things that I've learned that have helped my life be better. And I very specifically titled it, I learned, not you should, because I don't fucking know if any of that is going to be even 1% helpful for any other soul on this planet. But I can tell you from my own experience that when I went from not knowing this to knowing this, not understanding to understanding, my life got better. And so there is room, I think, for sharing our opinions, but the way we go about it is that question of like, okay, so you have the power of a strong identity. You know what your opinion is. That's a blessing all by itself, right? Because when you don't have a self, you also don't have an opinion. You're just blind faith. You're just blind agreement that like, oh, this person knows best. Like, there's no identity in that. There's no self. There's no individual. So like to have an opinion's a great sign. We're on the right track. Very much on the right track towards an empowered individual. So having an opinion is great. And then now that you have the power, what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to share that into the world? That is very much a choice for each individual to get to make. And it's a reflection of our self, you know, like, who am I? I'm the kind of person that does not want to force my opinions on other people. Consciously, that is my intention. Unconsciously, when I still slip back into my shadow, when I still slip into like just knee-jerk reactions and not really thinking, just moving kind of on impulse and instinct, I'll spill opinions on people without intending to. And then I come back around. And again, it's not a matter of letting go of opinion or even not sharing it with other people. It's really only a question of how are you going about that? And it's all in packaging. It's like a PR task. It's like, how are you packaging that opinion? Because there are multiple ways to go about it. Saying you should do XYZ is only one way. You know, have you ever thought about XYZ? I'm curious why you're doing it like this and not like this. You know, like there are so many ways to have an opinion. You don't have to say you should. You don't have to charge straight in and take over somebody else's personal sovereignty. And again, this is all from me to me. Because who's guilty party number one? Carly. Carly is very opinionated, and Carly is beautiful in her strong identity. And Carly is really figuring out how to, you know, I think it's like, it's like, which frequency are you at? Which frequency are you operating at in your fire energy? And as I raise the frequency of my fire, as I become more in tune with my ego, embracing it as a friend, letting it have a place at the table, it is feeding me with such good information, aka all of my own opinions, right? And it's letting me know what's right for me, right? Like that's all our opinion can ever tell us, is what's right for us personally. Our opinion is never going to give the answer to somebody else about what's right for them. Maybe it can present a piece of information for them to consider about, how or why or what it is that they're doing, but we don't have other people's answers. We just don't. And maybe that's a scary thought. Maybe it's a liberating thought. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. How does that feel for you? Your opinion is only ever about you. I would be so curious to hear your reflections. I thank you so much for letting me share this with you and you witnessing me in this space, going through my process of living into my the Aries North Node of this time and processing through what's coming up through that Libra South Node shadow coming into light and being made visible. I thank you so much for sharing this space with me. It's an honor to get to do this. Until next time, I hope you take such good care of yourself, hopefully your very opinionated self, and so will I.